Does the KE stand for Kiwi ears? Are these the Kiwi ears for? Kiwi ears offered me a KE4 in exchange for my opinions. A rather one-sided transaction, but here we are. At around €187, I will mostly be comparing the KE4 with the Orchestra Lite at €235, but further comparisons with other brands will come later. As usual, Kiwi ears opts for an almost Spartan unboxing experience and a very limited range of accessories. Included are 3 sets of silicone tips, the usual Kiwi ears carry case, and 2 sets of replacement nozzle dust filters. The overall shape and size of the KE4 is quite similar to the Orchestra Lite, however, it is not exactly the same shape, and unlike the Orchestra Lite, which has a molded nozzle as part of the resin housing, the KE4 has a fitted metal nozzle, which measures at just under 6mm. The nozzles are both the same length, however tips on the Orchestra Lite can slide further up the nozzle, due to there being no fitted shape. This means that technically the KE4 nozzles end up feeling longer, which didn't cause any discomfort for me, but the KE4 didn't quite fit as well as the Orchestra Lite in my ears, with tiny gaps between the entire housing and my ears, which I think makes external wind noise slightly more noticeable. The second biggest difference is the weight. The Orchestra Lite shell is a hefty 7.8 grams, while the KE4 is a relatively featherweight 5 grams. For some context, the heaviest IEM I have is the SimGot EA1000 at 11.1 grams, and the lightest is the Final Audio E4000 at 1.5 grams. The resin housings have a very dark pigment, but with a strong light you can just about make out some of the hardware inside. The 2 BA drivers are quite easy to pick out as they're in the thinner nozzle area, and if you've got some patience and a strong light, you might notice the 2 dynamic drivers that appear to be facing directly towards each other and partially sealed together around their circumference. The other big difference is that these shells are appropriately vented, so wear and comfort is all but guaranteed. Finally, onto the cable. It's not great. First thing out of the box, I was assaulted by a strong chemical smell which persists after a week. If I cup the cable in my hands and give it a sniff, it's still there. Fortunately, after about 2 to 3 weeks, the smell did completely disappear. On the whole, it's also quite prone to tangling, as it's relatively thin and doesn't use an extra sheath after the Y-split, like some other brands have done. Also, the Y-split metal part is excessively heavy and only adds to the tangle potential. If this was my only IEM, I would seriously consider replacing the cable. And finally, the 2-pin inner housing part of the cable protrudes slightly and doesn't fit into a recess in the shells. This isn't a big deal, as other brands also do this, as they're mixing and matching different parts that aren't always a perfect fit, and this doesn't really affect anything negatively. After a few weeks with the KE4, my final feelings on the overall sound presentation and quality is that of a smooth, monitoring IEM. Let me explain. As most of you know, this IEM falls into the category of the current meta tuning, the frequency response that falls very close to the global average and should at least satisfy the most ears and tastes. For one thing, I do agree, it has a healthy sub-bass response and just about shies away from being too energetic in the upper mid-range, barely avoiding the dreaded pinner gain. But you probably know all that already, that's the boring part. The imaging is exceptionally good, putting sounds in FPS games in exactly the correct places in all directions. It does make sacrifices in soundstage to achieve this. The sound is more on the intimate side and doesn't appear to leave the headspace, but the stereo accuracy you get in exchange for that alone becomes an extremely compelling argument for its asking price. Overall, the sound is bassy neutral, with what sounds like a tiny mid-range scoop. Bass timbre is thumpier than it is dry or accurate, so it's more tuned to being fun and bottomless, like the lower-end, subwooferish JVC HA FXZ200 sound of old. Speaking of which, the KE4 also can take quite a lot of bass boosting without seriously distorting. Whether it still sounds tasteful is of course another matter. The mid-range is more dry and clear than it is full or lush, with slight emphasis on upper mids. Treble is also pretty much neutral and doesn't appear to steer into being too splashy or too piercing, and neither too distant or recessed. But it is just missing a bit of air and naturalness. I think there might be something ever so slightly muted or dull about the treble, but it doesn't appear to sound like the typical flawed BA timbre you might find creeping into the SIMGOT EM6L, for example. Between those two, looking at this graph alone, you might think to save the €80 and go for the SIMGOT. And for some of you, that could be a very real option. Personally, regarding the sound, I prefer the KE4. Not only are the KE4's ergonomics and comfort significantly better than the EM6L for my ears, but side by side the KE4 sound is more natural and neutral. There is an argument to be made here for anyone looking for a direct upgrade from the EM6L. Comparing directly between the two, the EM6L's slight sheen in the upper mids and slightly weaker sub-bass presentation makes it appear to sound more detailed and have better separation, but the reality is that they're about on the same level of detail, with the KE4 only slightly edging out into the lead, but the KE4 takes another big step forward with superior separation overall. The KE4 has been priced extremely carefully. It seems Kiwi Ears has given very serious thought about this and paid very close attention to exactly where it should fit in the market according to its many strengths and few shortcomings compared to the competition. This is truly one of those times where I can say the price quite strongly reflects the market position, and there are going to be people who will gladly take the excellent imaging and tuning over something like the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite or the SIMGOT EA1000, which aren't as strong in the imaging but have bigger staging and a more musical performance. If you are one such person, just save some money and make the safe bet. These are quite possibly the most middle-of-the-road IEMs I've heard to date, the least inoffensive. They don't excel anywhere in particular, aside from the inoffensive tuning, but most importantly, neither do they exhibit any quirks or severe drawbacks. I'd like to quickly remind everyone that the Black Friday sales are coming up at the end of the month, which is a great time to take advantage of the affiliate links in the description, which is one of the best ways to support this channel. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.